everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Brenna, and today we're going to talk about 10 questions you should ask on your medical school interview day. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video if you like the content that you see today, and of course, subscribe to my channel if you want to get more content just like it. All right, let's get started. Interview day, think of it like this. Yes, you were invited to that school because they want to learn more about you, but it's also your opportunity to interview that school, interview the faculty members, interview the students, and figure out if it's really a good fit for you and what you want out of your medical education. So again, these are 10 questions that I think you should ask. I've split it up. The first 4 are questions directed more towards faculty or staff. There's one that can kind of be used for both faculty and staff and students. And then the last 5 questions are questions that you should direct towards the students that you get to interact with on your interview day. All right, let's jump right into it. So one of the first questions I think you should ask faculty or staff is, how are students exposed to clinical experiences during their first 2 years? Obviously, 3rd and 4th years rotations, it's all clinical experience, but practice makes perfect, and the earlier that we can get involved, either through shadowing or working in a clinic in your first 2 years, the better, because it'll make you more prepared come 3rd and 4th year. What I've found is that typically these experiences get you more involved in your community as well. So if you're going to a school that isn't where you grew up, it provides a great opportunity to connect with people in your community. And it can also often expose programs that you didn't find in your prior research. For example, one of the schools that I went to, they did a volunteer day at a clinic 1 day a week, and they were expanding it to 2 days a week. And I hadn't found that anywhere on their website. So I was really glad that I asked about it, because then I learned about that program. Another question you should ask faculty or staff revolves around research. So specifically, you can ask a professor, what sort of research are you getting involved in? Do you have students helping you out? And then of course, what kind of partnerships, research partnerships exist between the school and other entities? And is there any sort of interdisciplinary type research? All of this is really important because, first of all, to do research, you have to have funding. So if a school has an adequate amount of research for what your expectations are, then that's good. It means they've secured proper funding to do XYZ, or they've established a really good partnership with another local university that allows them to kind of share resources. And of course, what's the #1 rule of conversation? Ask other people about themselves, because everyone loves talking about themselves, right? Except in an interview. Nobody actually likes doing the interview part. But that's what makes asking about other people's research so fun. It's something that those professors theoretically are super invested in. So getting them to talk will help you understand the types of research opportunities available, but also get them really excited, and you kind of get to see another perspective of what that professor is like. Another question you can ask specifically to university staff is how students are supported during their clinical rotations. So what sort of supplemental education do students get before each rotation type? Do they have to come back to campus for that? How are placements established? These are all logistical things around rotations that you don't necessarily see as often online. So it's really good to ask and get that information so that you're prepared going into that 3rd and 4th year. Additionally, schools that provide a lot of support to their students, I don't know, I'd feel more comfortable going there, because I feel like there's an established way of doing things that you can work off of as a baseline. All right, the last question I would ask to faculty and staff during my interview days is probably one of my favorites to that demographic, and it's, why did you decide to work here? To me, it can expose a lot of really cool things about the community or about the school and its reputation in the surrounding area. It can also reveal some red flags potentially. And again, it gets that professor or faculty member talking, and you get to learn a little bit more about them as they explain their answer. All right, so this next question can really be aimed towards either faculty and staff or students, and it's, What's one thing that you love about this school, and what's one thing that you would change? And it's a really basic question. I'm sure we've all heard it before, but I like it because it immediately asks someone to identify their favorite. So that can be, I love the community, or I love the curriculum, or I love the OMM lab. And it can also reveal things that you can use later on your cons list when you're trying to decide where to go. So if negative is scheduling rotations is really confusing and there's poor communication, well, that's not good. Or maybe it's, we just don't do a lot of research here. We're kind of newer, and our funding just really isn't there yet. Well, if research is really important to you, then that sucks. Good thing you asked. So this question is great because it causes them to focus on both a positive and a negative of their school, and you get to learn a lot from it. Now we're moving on to questions specifically for students. On all of my interviews, I had so many opportunities to talk to students, and quite a few students at that. So definitely make sure to utilize that time well, try and talk to all of the students that are there with you that day, and really get as many perspectives as possible, because they're your best representative of what it would actually be like to attend that school. The first question I would ask is, what does a typical day look like for you? And that's really so you can try and envision yourself in their shoes, see if as they're explaining their day, I wake up here, I go to lecture here, I have lunch sometimes, you can try and walk yourself through it and see if you would be a good fit for the type of day that they're explaining. It can also reveal a few things about work-life balance, study habits that are common among the students at the school, maybe fun events. Maybe this school does a lot of fun events, so something that they mention in their day is, oh yeah, we did this cool activity that XYZ club put on. So it can just be a really fun general question to ask, and it's a really good warm-up question because it's not like you're asking them to recall something from the past or recite a piece of information. It's just, tell me about a day in your life. And it's just like more of a storytelling thing, and it makes people more comfortable and ready to answer more of your questions. Okay, this next question I liked asking because I felt like it really exposed how stressed out the students were. And that is, how do you feel about your academic performance thus far? Now you might say, hey, Brenna, all medical students are stressed. Like, that's not really fair to ask. Everyone's gonna feel super down in the dumps and super stressed. Wrong, 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 wrong. One of the schools that I interviewed at, every single one of the students I talked to said, yeah, I felt great about my last test. I think I've said that like twice about exams in my entire higher education career. So to me, that was like a whoa, 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 whoa. You're in medical school and you feel confident about how that exam went? So anyway, I like asking that question. Again, it can relate back to study habits. It can relate back to open door policies. Are they going in to talk to their professors all the time? It's just, where do you feel you are academically? So after talking about, their academics and what their day is like, I like to ask about involvement. So first, what are you involved in at school? Medical schools still have student organizations. Believe it or not, people still like to do things. They're just all medically related. So figuring out, the types of clubs that maybe someone's interested in, how much time they dedicate to those clubs, or the types of things that they do can be just really fun to learn about. I know one of them that I went to, they were like, this one club was practicing administering vaccines, and they had this whole event where everybody get an orange and a syringe filled with I think it was just water, and they got to practice, giving the flu vaccine to an orange. But it was super fun, and you actually got to learn a tangible skill, and it was put on by one of the clubs. So people ran that, people volunteered at it, people attended it, and it was just something that the school put on for fun. Other things is social events. Some schools put on the doctor prom or whatever. So fun things like that, or intramural sports. And it can just be really fun to learn about how people are getting involved socially at the school. So in conjunction with that, I also like to ask, what do you do outside of school? It's just good to not be focused on school 100% of the time, because that's just not good for your mental health and you're gonna burn out super quickly. So if people aren't super involved at school, or if they have families, or maybe they really love to go to church, or they really love this one community group that like does a bunch of travel in the local area. I don't care what it is. I just want to see, are these students doing things outside of school to refresh themselves, refresh their brain, and just refresh their emotional state before they hit the books one more time. So this last question that I would ask students on your interview day is, what made you decide to go to this school, and would you come here again if you had the choice? Now for me, this really, like, having this question answered at all of the schools that I interviewed at was super helpful, because when it comes to decisions, those are really the thoughts that are resounding in your mind. Like, why should I choose a specific school over another? And using other people's answers as examples can kind of help you make that decision. The one answer that I remember most clearly is one of the students said, look, I went to a bunch of interviews. My interview at this school was my first one, and I kind of used it as the measuring stick for all of the other schools that I went to, and nobody else measured up. Perfect. And it was my first interview at that school too. And from that point forward, I was just constantly comparing all the schools that I interviewed at to that first school. And he was right. None of them really measured up. So at least like in my eyes. So things like that. Or, I really liked the location. It was good for my family to move here. Or, I really loved their rotation options. I just thought that was most important to me, is to get a really good variety of rotational hospitals. So that was another awesome answer, that I got to use that information when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to say, yes, I'm going there. All right, so that was my 10 questions that you should ask on your interview day. I hope it was helpful, and I hope I introduced at least one or two new questions that you hadn't thought of before. Keep in mind, you don't just have to ask these on an interview day. You can ask them if you go to an open house at the school, or if you're talking with a recruiter at a career fair. It's just the content that they're asking about is meant to help you get to know the school better. One thing I will say is just talk to as many people as possible. Just get as many perspectives as possible, because if you find consistencies among multiple people's responses, then it just validates that one thing, or that those few things are really true. Like, if everyone constantly talks about community, then that school has a really great community-based atmosphere. So just hearing things like that over and over again can further validate why you should or should not go to that school, and ultimately help you make that decision of where you're going to get your medical education. That's it for today, so thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. As always, if you want to hear anything more about interviews, the application process, me, feel free to list it in the comments below, or DM me on Instagram at BrennaJFutureDoc. Thanks again for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye!